Give it a rev for you guys. Just a little rev before we take off here. Okay, we gotta get out of here. So this Aston Martin DB7 is not a dream car of mine. I know that sounds crazy. Under the hood, all the hardware, everything that makes this car up is the recipe, right? It's got 3 pedals, it's got a massive V12 under the hood. That in and of itself should be enough to make a dream car, but it's in context. When we look at all of the modern Aston Martins that came after this, the Vanquish, the newer Vantages, and of course the DB9, it's easy to overlook this car. It's easy to forget about it. So that's why I'm so incredibly excited to drive it today. All right, you guys, here we go. Can we beat the train? Is 400 pound-feet enough? I've been waiting to drive this car for a long time. Thank you, Jerry. It's my buddy Jerry's car. He recently picked this up, but what he did do in the last few days is completely gutted the exhaust. He cut the exhaust out. The only things that are left are the primary cats. Yeah, that's it. Oh, I'm excited. This is the first manual transmission V12 I've driven. I believe the first manual Aston I've ever driven. And of course, this is the car that sparked the front engine V12 Aston as we know it. Of course, the DB9 followed this car, but if we look on the exterior here, first off, why I say, with a little bit of oversteer, that was with traction on, why I say it's not quite my dream car is because, first off, the way it looks. This is not as striking of a vehicle as a DB9. It's not as striking of a vehicle as the later Vantages. Definitely not as striking or handsome or pretty as the Vanquish, however you want to personify your Astons, whatever flavor you like to put them in. But it's a great looking car. We all know and love the shape of this grille, the shape of this coupe, the way this car looks. Now, because it's been put to use in so many other Astons, but this was really the first modern application of this design. All right, before we continue, I want to give a huge thanks to TouchUpDirect for sponsoring this video and helping me get my Skyline ready for driving season, okay? The rest of the car needs plenty of upgrades, but if you're like me and you like going on long drives, especially at higher speeds, rock chips are inevitable, okay? And TouchUpDirect was very quick to point out that I had plenty, so let's get to it. What we've got here is one of their brush kits. It comes with instructions, a test section, gloves, and 3 coats, a primer, color, and clear. After testing if the QM1 Nissan paint is a match, I'm gonna just go for broke with these nasty chips I have all over the front bumper. Some of them are even down to bare metal, so primer is definitely essential here. We'll start with that. Next, I did a few coats of white, and then of course clear coat to finish it all off. I think it turned out pretty good. And with a quick polish, of course, after waiting 48 hours, you can get it even closer to that OEM look. Of course, my paint is 25 years old at this point, so like I said, giant uphill battle here, but especially from back here, looks great. In the past, I probably would have just ignored all of the comments about my imperfect Skyline and rock chips. You know, the standards are high here in the Japanese car world, but having a kit like this that I can just keep in my car for longer drives and attack those rock chips when they happen versus waiting until the bare metal turns into rust is just such a good thing to have. They also have paint pens and aerosol cans, so the link is in the description, TouchUpDirect.com. You can go see if they have your paint code, and chances are they do. Thank you guys so much again for sponsoring this video. The link is in the description. Back to the Aston. We almost got air back there. Oh, the sound is just phenomenal. It is so high pitched and it has different tones to it. Above 4,000 RPM, it has a very high pitched resonance to it. Below 4,000, it has more of what I would expect to hear from a newer Vantage, which is effectively the same engine architecture. But it definitely has more of a Ferrari sound here. It's a Cosworth V12. It was developed with Ford. And of course, this DB7, this V12, the 6-liter or 5.9 as it were, this was the first application for this 5.9 liter. While the seats are nice, it's got leather everywhere, some wood trim. You could also spec carbon fiber, Alcantara headliner. I'm sitting an inch too high here, which I wasn't expecting. I was actually expecting this to be basically like a DB9. You're very, very low. You feel like you're sunk low into the car. I do feel like I'm kind of driving on top of the car, which I didn't want to tell you guys that. I didn't want to come back and be like, the DB7 is not a perfect experience, but it's not perfect. The sound is perfect, and it does rev up so incredibly quickly. The heel toes, the downshifts, so easy. If you short shift, you're missing out. There's torque, but you'll never know what you're missing until you get to 7. Then there's just kind of like an extra little shove. My God, I'm just downshifting to hear the engine again. This Vantage was originally sold as a supercharged, with a supercharged inline 6. Unbelievable, they've come so far. It proved to be not popular. Not surprising. I could have told you guys that. So much power. It feels like a small car. And, you know, there's some body roll, there's some swaying going on, but it's not as easy to upset as I would have expected. There's definitely not as much, doesn't feel like there's as much mechanical grip here as could be found in the DB9. The steering's not perfect. It has a bit of a springy feel to it. It's a little bit dead on center, but that's to be expected from 90s power steering for the most part. GTRs are absolutely an exception to that. R33s and R34 GTRs have some of the best steering from the 90s. But here it's not perfect. You really have to dive in deep to get feel out of the front tires. This is much smaller than the DB9 I drove though. It feels smaller. The wheelbase is about 4 inches smaller than that car. It's not so much shorter in overall length, but the wheelbase in this car is standard Vantage wheelbase. Oh, and of course the throttle's mechanical. It's got just a little bit of resistance there. You know, this could be your daily driver. You could daily drive this car. It has a trunk. It's got an amp back there actually that says V12. It's an Aston Martin amp. Of course, they got to put V12 on the amp so when you pop the trunk and pop also as well, in addition, your Aston Martin umbrella, much like the Pulsar GTI-R or any Rolls-Royce for that matter. When you're looking at the climate control though, let's be honest here, this looks like a Ford parts bin. I don't know if these are actually Ford parts, I'm just guessing. I'm probably right, I'd put money on that. The temperature control on the driver's side is flipped, it's opposite, hot and cold to the temperature control on the passenger side. The hot's on the top here, and the cold's on the top on the passenger side. Very odd. One thing that's not Ford here, however, is the transmission. This is a Tremec T56, which will be found in a lot of Chevrolet products, of course, GM products. It's nice and notchy, it's got a good throw. It's not like BMW sloppiness. It feels like it's an American car. It kind of has a muscle car feel to it, definitely in size. This is a lot more chuckable than the DB9, absolutely. I keep missing third gear. That's difficult. Now, missing third and fourth gear, very easy, as is the same with most other Tremec cars, Tremec vehicles. Revs to 7,000 RPM. It doesn't need to go higher. 420 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. It's adequate. I mean, when we think about, I don't know, just coming back to the Tremec T56, a Corvette at the time, Z06 C5, 405 horsepower. This had more power than that, more torque, about the same amount of torque, but it's exotic. It's got the sound to it. The real question for me is the later kind of mechanical grip of the car still here? Does it feel closer to a DB9, which I've driven? But is it more of a GT car? Or does it have a little bit of sports car flavor when you begin pushing it? Or, as I've kind of come to find out, is it more of just a muscle car? It's a muscle car just in the way that it feels kind of thrown together, with exception to the engine and the sounds and everything like that. The Alcantara headliner, this is very Aston Martin. The design, very, very Aston Martin, of course, designed by Ian Callum. So this being a car that was originally supposed to be a Jag, and actually was built in the same factory, believe it or not, as the XJ220. And because of that, this car weighs a lot more than the later Vantages. When you compare the DB7, a visually smaller looking car, smaller package, it wraps around me definitely a lot more than the DB9, but it's a smaller package here. It was built mainly out of steel. It had a steel construction underneath, versus all of the other Astons that followed this were aluminum. So, whereas this weighs just under 4,000 pounds, it is a heavy, heavy vehicle. A later V12 Vantage that you guys probably picture when you hear that name weighs about 3,700 pounds. So there's about a 300 pound difference there. That's a lot. That's 2 passengers. Speaking of passengers, it's got back seats much like a 911, although usable, no. If you absolutely cannot have the 4.3 or the 4.7 V8 Vantage, that I think at this point probably is at close to the lowest of its depreciation curve. If you can't have that V8, if you must have the V12, but you can't afford that later V12 Vantage, this is the car to buy. This is the car to buy, if only to hold you out until you can actually get that V12 Vantage. That's the dream for me, the V12 Vantage S. Those are so incredibly expensive. I mean, a Vantage S V12 is a $250,000 car USD nowadays, and they're probably only going up, which is why I posed the question, is this the one to buy today? Because it has the whole recipe. Thank you guys for watching. This has been a great drive. Thank you so much, Jerry. If you want to follow Jerry, his Instagram and stuff will be in the description below. You can find me on Instagram at Untraveled. Until next time, we'll see you soon.